My father spent 40 years alone in the Pacific Northwest, cataloging plants that most people will never see. When he died, he left me almost nothing. A cabin, a pair of boots, and one field journal. The last of dozens, the only one he kept beside his bed instead of on the shelf.
I thought I knew what was inside it. Latin names, soil measurements, sketches of leaves.
I was right about every page except one.
Page 42 has an entry that should never exist in a botanist's field journal. I read it once, standing in his cabin 3 days after the funeral. Then I closed the book, drove home to Portland, and did not open it again for 6 years. Stay with me until the end, because this isn't a story about what my father forgot. It's a story about what he refused to let himself forget. To understand why one page could close a book for 6 years, you need to understand the man who wrote it. And to understand him, you need to understand that my father did not speak the way other fathers speak. He cataloged. Before I take you into that forest, let me say this. If this story touches something you recognize, a parent you're losing slowly, or one you lost before you were ready, I'd love for you to become part of the Vellum of Life community. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I share a story about quiet strength and the things people leave behind. And if you've lived a story like this one, tell me in the comments, or send it privately to vellumoflife@gmail.com. Your privacy will always be respected. Names, places, every identifying detail can be changed. Every story deserves dignity, including yours. Now, the forest. My father's name was Everett. He was a field botanist for a university research station, which is a formal way of saying he was paid a modest salary to disappear into the Olympic Peninsula for weeks at a time and come back with notebooks. He was not a cold man. I want to be careful about that, because it would be easy to tell this story wrong. He was a quiet man, which is different.
When I was 7, he took me into the forest for the first time. He didn't tell me to be careful or to stay close. He knelt beside a fern, turned a frond over with 2 fingers, and said,
"Look at the underside. Everyone photographs the top. The truth is always on the underside."
That was my father's version of a hug.
My mother died when I was 11. After that, the forest got more of him, and I got less. He wasn't running from me. I understand that now. He was running toward the only place where the world still made sense to him. A forest doesn't ask you how you're holding up. A forest just continues. He wrote everything down, every sample, every season, every anomaly. His handwriting was the neatest I have ever seen. Small, upright, disciplined, like a man who believed that if you recorded something precisely enough, you could keep it. I left for college, then a job, then a life. We spoke on the phone on the first Sunday of every month, 11 minutes on average. I know because he once mentioned the average, the way other fathers mention the weather. And once, on one of those calls, he said something I didn't understand at the time. He said,
Every tree leaves seeds before it falls.
I thought he was talking about botany. The last years, the calls changed. Small things. He asked me twice in the same conversation whether I'd fixed the gutter, a gutter I'd fixed 3 years earlier. He called me on a Tuesday once, and my father did not call on Tuesdays. When I mentioned it, there was a pause on the line, and then he said,
Well, the phone was in my hand.
And he laughed, which frightened me more than the mistake, because my father did not cover things with laughter.
I told myself he was getting older. That's the sentence we use, isn't it? He's just getting older. It's a sentence that lets us keep our lives running on schedule.
He died in the cabin, in his sleep, in early October, the month he always called the honest month, because that's when the forest stops pretending.
3 days after the funeral, I sat at his table with the last journal.
I opened it the way you open anything of his, expecting order. And the first pages delivered. Sample numbers, coordinates, that immaculate handwriting. But on page 9, one word was crossed out. Just one. My father did not cross out words. He thought before he wrote. That was the entire architecture of the man. On page 17, a date repeated. 2 entries, 2 different days of observations, the same date at the top of each. On page 23, he had recorded a flower as blue, then corrected it to violet, then corrected it back.
I remember my hands going still on the paper, because I understood I wasn't reading a field journal anymore.
I was reading a decline, catalogued by the only person precise enough to document his own. And then I turned to page 42. I'm not going to tell you what was on it, not yet, because for 6 years I didn't tell myself either. I read it once. I closed the journal, I put it in a box, put the box in a closet in Portland, and I built 6 careful years on top of that closet. People asked sometimes if I'd gone through my father's things. I said, mostly. That word did a lot of work. Here's what I've learned about grief. It will wait. It's the most patient thing you will ever own. It sat in that closet without making a sound, and it did not lose 1 ounce of its weight. What changed after 6 years was small. It usually is. My daughter, she was 9, was doing a school project about family. She asked me what her grandfather did. I said he was a botanist. She asked what he was like. And I opened my mouth. And I had the outline of him. The boots, the 11-minute phone calls, the underside of the fern. But when I reached for the center of the man, for what he was like, I found that I was already forgetting. The exact sound of his voice, whether he took his coffee black. I stood in my kitchen and could not remember whether my father took his coffee black. That night, I took the box down from the closet. I didn't go to page 42. I wasn't ready. Instead, I did what I suspect he would have wanted. I started at the beginning, and I read the journal the way he wrote it. In order, with discipline. I read a man fighting for his own mind with the only weapon he had ever trusted, documentation. Because that's what it was. I saw it clearly now. As the handwriting loosened, the system tightened. He started writing the day of the week beside every date, verifying himself. He began each morning's entry by listing 3 fixed facts: his name, his location, the current sample number. A man building handrails out of ink. He never once wrote the word for what was happening to him. Not once in the whole journal. He just kept cataloging. Sample 84, sample 85, sample 86. Sample 87 stops in the middle of a sentence. The journal sat on my desk for another 2 weeks after that. I'd notice it at night, the small rusted paperclip you could see from the page edge marking 42, like the book itself refused to forget where it was wounded. On a Sunday morning, the first Sunday of the month, and I chose it on purpose, I sat down and I turned to page 42.
At the top, in handwriting, still fighting to stay upright, it says,
Sample 42. Interrupted.
And underneath, one line.
Today, I could not remember why I carried this photograph in my pocket.
Held to the page with that paperclip is a photograph of a boy, maybe 7 years old, grinning, missing a tooth, standing in front of a fern half his height.
The boy is me.
My father carried me in his pocket. Through 40 years of forests, through weeks of solitude, he carried that photograph, and I never knew. And on the day the photograph became a stranger to him, he did not panic on the page. He wrote it down. Interrupted.
The pages after 42 are not botany.
They are attempts. He tried to catalog me, the way he would catalog a species he was terrified of losing.
Caleb, born in April, broke his arm falling from the birch, age 9. Did not cry until we reached the truck. Turns the radio down when he's thinking, like his mother.
Rough, repetitive, some entries have finished. A field scientist making a desperate record of his own son, the underside of the frond, where the truth was.
And on the last of those pages, in the largest letters in the whole journal, as if he knew his future self would need help reading.
If one day I ask who the boy in this photograph is, read this journal to me before you answer.
He never had to ask. The forest took him gently before that day came. But he had prepared for it. My silent, precise, impossible father had prepared for the worst day of both of our lives, so that if it came, I wouldn't have to face it without instructions. Sitting there with the photograph in my hand. I had spent 6 years believing page 42 was the record of my father losing me. It's the record of my father refusing to lose me. Every entry after that page is a man standing in the doorway of his own mind, passing what mattered most out to safety before the roof came down. He didn't write about the disease. He wrote about me. My whole life I thought my father's love was quiet because it was small. It was catalogued. There was one thing left to do. The final entry stopped mid-sentence, a description of a lichen he'd found on the north side of a fallen cedar. That spring I drove to the peninsula with his journal and his field guides. It took me 2 days to find the cedar. He'd left coordinates, of course he had. The lichen was still there. It had continued, the way forests do. I knelt on the wet ground, and in my own handwriting, looser than his, less disciplined, unmistakably his son's, I finished the entry. Species, condition, date. And then, below it, I broke his rule. I wrote a sentence that was not botany, catalogued by his son, who remembers. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, the way you do when no one is watching, and I closed the book. The journal lives on my shelf now, not in a closet. My daughter knows which one it is. She's the one who found what I'd somehow missed for years. Pressed flat against the inside of the back cover, a single leaf. A big leaf maple, pressed decades ago, still perfect, every vein intact. A pressed leaf outlives the hand that pressed it. These days, I think about a man alone in a cabin, feeling the water rising, who sat down every single morning and wrote his own name, his location, and the number of the day's work, and then wrote about his son, who never complained on a single page,
who left instructions instead of apologies.
Every tree leaves seeds before it falls.
I finally understood what he meant. If someone in your life speaks quietly, in objects, in routines, in 11-minute phone calls, look at the underside. Everyone photographs the top.
The truth is always on the underside. If this story stays with you, share it with one person who still has time to ask their father a question. Leave a like if you recognized someone you love in Everett, and I'll see you in the next story. Thank you for being part of Vellum of Life.